This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me and today Josie Lewis, our head gardener at Perch Hill. And we did an episode in the middle of last month talking about the activity going on in the polytunnel here, or the polytunnels here. And we thought we would come back a month later in mid-April and talk about what we're doing at this stage. So it's sort of behind the scenes, as sort of descriptive an episode as we can of the things that we're busy on. So good morning, Josie.
Hello there, and nice to be back with a bit more heat and light, which are the main things.
Yeah. Gardeners as well as plants like a bit of heat and light.
Absolutely.
I would say.
Yeah.
Me for sure. And I know, well, you're much hardier than me, but I'm a very fair weather gardener. So, yeah, I mean, obviously this is the busiest month in the garden, really. I mean, May is pretty manic too, and we'll come back and reconvene in May. But May is, of course, about planting out once the frosts are over. But we are bursting at the seams right now because, of course, we're starting to plant out hardy annuals, so things like cerinthe that we talked about sowing last month, and actually antirrhinums, which are on the cusp of hardy and half hardy, as well as things like, broad beans, etc., on their last bit of planting out, and lots of salads and herbs. So we're doing the hardies, planting them out, but we're also still doing a little bit of sowing, which we'll come on to. Josie's doing an awful lot with dahlias, which she's going to talk about. And we're then pricking out all the stuff that we sowed in March. So, and that's only some of what we're doing, really. So it is, it's a very, very, very busy but hugely fulfilling month because growth curves are steeply on the up. So you can pot something on or prick something out, and a week later it's doubled in size. And I find that so optimistic and so sort of rewarding. And you do too, don't you, Josie?
Yes, absolutely. And if you haven't got round to sowing in March, don't panic, because as Sarah says, if you sow now, they will grow so fast, and they love the light levels are right now for germination and quick growth. And that's really great for plants. The polytunnel is rather full. We're doing a lot of Tetris as we move everything around constantly. So with the dahlias, I mean, they're growing really well. The seeds are up, and we pricked some out, and some are going to be pricked out now. So they're the ones that were tubers, we planted as tubers, are obviously ahead of the seed sown ones. And so we've been starting to pinch out, really, because they can't go out until really all danger of frost has passed, because they really don't like cold nights. So we will pinch them out, keep them bushy, and move them on. So if they're really bursting at the seams and growing really well, we will pot on to another size pot. You don't want to check their growth. So once a pot is full of root, you need to move it on, really. It's either got to go out or it's got to go into a slightly bigger pot. Once you hold them back, they will recover, but they're never quite the same. I think that's to get really good garden plants. You've got to keep picking your pots up and looking at the base to see if the roots are through, and just moving them on if you have to. In an ideal world, they would be ready to go out, but this is British weather, and we never know really what's coming our way. Yes, so dahlias, the bits that we've pinched out from the tops, we'll use as cuttings. So those tops go into gritty compost in a small pot, and those pinching out cuttings will grow into new dahlia plants. So you'll get extras that way too. They'll obviously be exactly the same as their parents, which with sowing seed, you don't know what you're going to get, but with cuttings and tubers, you know exactly what you're going to get.
would you mind just taking us all through, Josie, exactly at what stage you take the dahlia cutting and exactly what you do with it, so people feel empowered to go out to their greenhouse or polytunnel or window ledge and actually do some propagating?
Okay. I mean, there's two ways you can take cuttings. You can force your tubers early and take cuttings from as the shoots come off the tubers. So you take a little bit of, the top of the tuber, and those take really well. Or once your tuber has sprouted and you've got, say, 5 or 6 shoots, which is what you want to end up with. And if you've got, say, 4 sets of true leaves on them, then above that, you pinch out. So you're above a set of leaves, you take the top bit of the stem off, and then that can be used as a cutting. So you strip off the lower leaves of that section, pinch out the top, and then put that into a pot of gritty compost without people being able to see what I'm trying to describe. I hope that it's really difficult, actually. Yeah. But yeah, I hope it makes sense anyway.
It does make sense. It does make sense. And just I'm going to take us a step back too on pricking out. And so I guess the point with stuff you've grown from seed is you put it into a seed tray, and particularly with tiny seeds, it's very, very difficult to scatter it widely enough that you don't then get competition between plant 1, plant 2, plant 3, i.e. the neighbouring siblings. And so that is the point of pricking out, is that you move things like antirrhinums, nicotianas, amaranth that we sowed last month have now germinated and have been growing on for a couple of weeks. And they now have 2 pairs of true leaves, or, certainly 1 pair is coming through. And so at that point, that if you uproot that little tiny seedling or baby, it's got a sophisticated enough root system that even if you uproot it and destroy some of the root, some of the tiny, tiny, tiny micro roots, it's okay. And it will actually, as long as you firm it in, grow off perfectly happily. Whereas if you leave it any later, what happens is that they're starting to compete with their closer neighbours. So if you leave it to like the 4th leaf stage, they're starting to really compete and the root being compromised by the neighbour. And so you get a compromised plant, which Josie alluded to earlier. So pricking out, that's the point. Is I think of it almost like you're moving a child from sort of childminder to nursery to perhaps kindergarten to the first year at primary school, and on you go. And this first stage is really important. And you can't just leave them languishing at nursery, because they need to develop and they need more space to develop. And that is literally how I think of it. And so you're going into your seed tray. And I use a biro, to be honest. I use a pen. You can use a rigid label. Some people have special bits of kit. You can have a cut-off bit of like stub wire, strong stub wire or fence wire, and you just put your, whatever you're using, your implement underneath and lift from below. Never hoik from above, always lift from below. And then once you've loosened the root from below, you can just ease the thing out, holding the seed leaves, never the stem, only the seed leaves, because again, they will take more handling than the stem. The stem bruises really easily. And then between lifting from below and lifting the seed leaves from above, you've got an individual baby that goes into its own pot, basically, or its own bigger module. And that is what pricking out is. And then when it grows on a little bit to perhaps the 3-leaf stage, you want to pinch out the tip. And pinching out the tip, again, talking about plant physiology, you're redistributing the growth hormone in the plant, because what's happening at that point is that seedling is rocketing. It's absolutely, every cell is pumping full of growth hormone. And where that tends to collect is in the apex. And by removing apical dominance, i.e. by pinching out the tip at the 3-leaf stage, what happens is that you create a stump there. There is nowhere for the growth hormone to go. Where does it go? sinks down into the root and promotes root formation, and it rises up in the plant and promotes auxiliary bud formation. And that is between the stump and a pair of leaves, so those top pair of leaves. And that then means you get auxiliary buds, more root formation, and you get a really chunky, stronger plant growing on its own after pricking out rather than competing with its close neighbours. So that, hopefully, if you understand why you have to go to the palaver of pricking out, you'll understand, if you understand it, then you'll do it. And I did a podcast with Millie Proust, a wonderful florist and a cut flower farmer and grower, a couple of weeks ago. And I was saying that I absolutely loved pricking out. And she just couldn't believe it because for her, I think it's like the essay crisis, except there are 25 essays waiting to be done. But because I no longer am so daily involved with propagation here, for me, it feels like a real luxury. So I've got to take her up on, I must fulfill my offer to Millie to go over for a Saturday and spend my day pricking out.
Yeah, you'll wish you hadn't offered then.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that because we need you doing it here.
I thought you and Rebecca might say that. It's all right. Yes. I'll do Sunday here and Saturday with Millie.
Excellent. Yeah. The other thing about pricking out is if you've got leggy seedlings, then bury some of the stem. When you're doing a seedling, it doesn't have to be at the same height as it was in the seed tray. So you can bury the stem. I think that's true for most seedlings, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Really good point.
But particularly for things like cosmos, which grow so quickly.
Yeah.
We just, bury at least, bury half the stem, or you can, if your pot that you're potting into is deep enough, you can go up to just below the seed leaves.
Yeah.
And, cosmos will root from the stem as well as from its actual root ball. So you'll get a nice solid root ball, which will hold them up much better when they go out into the garden as well.
Yeah, yeah. As you've mentioned them, Josie, I wonder if you'd mind taking us through the mid-April sowing list, because it isn't very long, because we've done most of our sowing in March.
No, you can obviously re-sow things that you've done in the year already, and things that will grow quickly are fine to do in April. But the things that we don't sow before April are cosmos and zinnias, are the main two. They hate being cold. Once you sow them in April, they'll germinate really quickly. They'll be up in a few days. Because there's enough light levels, they'll grow into really sturdy seedlings.
Yeah.
And if you start them off in February or March, they will germinate, but they'll elongate and they'll be waiting for the light and the warmth.
Yeah.
And if you have them indoors, there's never enough light in your house. So do wait. Hold off until mid-April. And they move so quickly. And as people will know, we have a massive cosmos here every year, and those won't have been sown before April. So
yes.
Hold out.
Yes, yes. And the other thing about zinnias, which you've definitely alluded to, but I find zinnias are like tomatoes, which is, I used to get really impatient and I used to sow my zinnias and tomatoes too early. And then they were struggling and wanting to go out into the garden. But what I find with both zinnias and tomatoes is that you cannot really start putting them out, even here in Sussex, until mid-May into the garden, even late May. And so there is no point getting sowing earlier with your zinnias. There is for tomatoes because they're slow to develop, but zinnias are super quick.
Yes. Yeah.
It's 3 weeks from sowing to planting out, 3 to 4 weeks. And so that's why mid-April is the perfect time, because otherwise they just struggle in the cold. And I'll never forget, I had a lovely trip to Sri Lanka about 15 or 20 years ago, and I've never seen better zinnias. They were up to my waist. And of course, it's because it's humid there and hot. And the nights are quite warm, and zinnias absolutely thrive. They're originally lots of them from Mexico. But yeah, it's just they won't like it. And so a good rule that I have with myself with tomatoes and zinnias, if you're happy to have a drink or even supper in the garden, so, without a hot water bottle and a coat, so i.e. just, normal clothes, then zinnias and tomatoes are happy to be planted in the garden. And I just think that's quite a good measure. And so, now is the time to sow them, not any earlier. Anyway, if you have sown them earlier and you're hearing this and you're panicking, don't worry, just pot them on and don't put them out until the middle of May.
Give them as much light as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And keep pinching them out so you'll have a bushier plant, hopefully. But some of the pictures I see of these long, leggy, stick-like things, I think, oh, those poor plants.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way, people are better off to ditch them, and if they've got any seed left in the packs, start again. Yes, because they will catch up.
The other thing I wanted you just to describe, Josie, because it's very busy in the polytunnel right now, is taking cuttings of things like pelargoniums and salvias, because people tend to think that's something you do in the autumn, but actually you can create more plants really readily now, can't you?
Yes, yeah. And because everything is on this growth curve and everything, there's plenty of hormones and everything is going really fast. It's a good time to take cuttings. Pelargoniums, I mean, we tend to do in January when we're repotting our pelargoniums. But if people have time now, then it's a really good time. You can take cuttings of, things like fuchsia are classically done in spring as greenwood cuttings. They're slightly more difficult because there's not much lignin in the stems, so they're quite floppy and they might take a bit more care. But things like pelargoniums, which are a bit tougher anyway, they're fine. Again, pinch them out, make them into bushy plants, and use what you've pinched out as cuttings. Just again around the edge of a pot of very gritty compost. So you need very free draining compost, and you'll have lovely new plants by the end of the summer, and they would flower the same year this year. If you take cuttings early enough, you'll get a decent sized plant. Salvias the same. They'll be brushing off into growth from March onwards, and you can take cuttings of those early. We've tended to do it in autumn when it's a bit quieter, but if you've got time to do them now, then it's a really good time, and they'll root really well.
Great. So the final thing that I'd love us to cover, Josie, if that's okay, is the thing that we don't necessarily agree on. So it's quite funny to...
Okay. I don't know what's coming.
we agree on most things. Well, I'm much tougher on things on the hardening off front. I mean, you definitely like a bit of hardening off. I mean, I'll just put my case first. I mean, I just find if you grow things quite hard, and not with any air heat, but just basal heat, which is what we do here. So we have a horticultural electric blanket in our polytunnel, and it lays on top of a bench, and the bench is made from a wooden base with a polystyrene roofing tile as the next layer. Then on top of that is a horticultural electric blanket, which is completely safe, obviously not like a domestic electric blanket. I mean, they're safe, but... it's not what you can use outside. And then we have a sort of capillary matting or something which absorbs and holds on to water on the next layer. And then on top of that, we have our seed trays, which are germinating, or our seedlings, which have been pricked out and are growing on. And then, so the air is not heated. Obviously, there's a little bit of heat coming off the electric blanket. But then they often get moved to the outer beds, which don't have any heat, so they don't have a horticultural electric blanket. And so the polytunnel will protect to -3 or -4 degrees, one layer of plastic, 2 layers of plastic to about -6. And so we fleece things inside, sometimes under a double layer of fleece. So when we had that very cold spell pre-Christmas, if you remember, where we actually had a bit of snow here, and when we got back here to work in the first week of January, we had them in the polytunnel, the electric blanket was on, and the staff weren't back by that point. It was between Christmas and New Year, I think. Was it when we had snow? Or no, maybe the second of Jan, wasn't it, I think?
Yes, early on, yeah.
So we had a double layer of fleece, which I put over them in the night and uncovered them in the day. Anyway, I'm blaring on, but I personally have found in the past that with the things that I grow, which aren't super tender, that is okay to then put straight out. But Josie thinks, and she's going to put her case, that you create a stronger plant if they then go out into a cold frame outside. So Josie, put your case.
Yeah, as you say, we move them from the the central heated bench to the side benches where there's no heat. So that's their first stage. And then they go from there into the cold frames. And, if it's we have had cold snaps. So the cold frames need to be closed. And if it gets cold, really cold, if it's going down to minus, then we put a bit of carpet or a bit of fleece over the top of the cold frame just to stop it getting frozen, because we've done so much work by that point that we don't want to lose the plants. But I'm not advocating, much as you might think this, that you take them in the polytunnel, out the polytunnel. We just don't have the time and the space to do that.
Yeah.
So they go out of the polytunnel into the cold frame. They're there for a couple of weeks. We obviously completely addicted weather watchers to see what's coming up. And if it looks fine enough, then they will go out into the garden. And even then, do you remember a few years ago, we put the dahlias out too early and we had to fleece this huge section of garden. And the last few years, we haven't had frosts after the beginning of May. So, is it changing to that now? Are we safe to go at the beginning of May? But you just never know, do you? So, yeah, I would harden off, but I'm not sort of in and out of the polytunnel with the same plants. We just can't do that.
No.
So if you've got somewhere you can put them outside, because obviously putting them from their pots straight into the ground, particularly if the soil isn't warmed up enough, is quite a shock to them. So if they can sit outside anywhere in their pots, then that's fine. And just, throw a bit of fleece or covering over them at night if it's going to get down below, say, 5 degrees, then I would look after them a bit more. But yeah, they're ready to go. They need to be out there growing.
Yeah, good. Good. All right. Well, that's lovely. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope that was helpful. And we'll be back again in a month, Josie and I, to talk about behind the scenes on how we do the planting out, which I know sounds incredibly obvious, but I find Josie pretty full of tips and tricks. So we will see you in the middle of May. And thank you, Josie.
Pleasure. See you next month.
Thanks very much for listening to a very practical, down-to-earth episode with me and Josie Lewis, our head gardener here at Perch Hill. Next week, I'm joined by Hugh Richards, who is a new friend of mine who I really admire enormously, a young man who's based in Wales, and he's the most fantastic vegetable grower. I'm sure lots of you have come across him with his one-bed veg book, which has been a massive success. Anyway, he's going to be a regular contributor here now, and he's back with us to say what he's sowing at this time of year. So kind of mid-April onwards, really. So Hugh Richards on Veg having a chat with me. So I hope to see you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.